Bueno, buenas tardes a...
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the presentation of Dream Count, the new novel of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I've been practicing with her before to say this properly. As you can imagine, it is a great pleasure for me to be able to talk with Chimamanda, who is one of the most fascinating authors recently. I think she is one of the most important voices in current literature. Many of you know her first novels. I have given her work out as a gift. We Should All Be Feminist, for instance, and also novels such as Americana, and recently an essay about loss and also child literature as Grace James. And today she is here to present this novel after a few years without writing as much, after 12 years publishing without publishing. Now we have this novel that has to do with a personal mourning. She explores the lives of 4 women, and we will get to know the 4 of them in this conversation. We will talk about violence, health, postmodern tourism, and of course also in the background the pandemic that we went through almost 6 years ago. I would like to talk to her on many topics. Welcome to Madrid. And first of all, I would like to ask you about that narrative structure, choral structure with changes in the perspective, different voices that mix. I don't know if you thought about this from the very beginning. Did you want this novel to be this polyphony of 4 voices, 4 stories that cross each other?
Yes, I think so. Well, first of all, thank you to all of you for being here. It's nice to be in, I'm going to try and say it like I've heard people say it, Madrid. Because I feel that the D is almost silent.
Yes.
Madrid. So it's nice to be here. I've only been here for not quite a day, but I've had some interesting experiences, so that's nice. I won't tell you about it. I'll just save it for my next novel. I'm going to have a character who comes to Madrid, and then the character is going to have a difficult time getting to her hotel because there are protests going on in Madrid. And one protest is about Gaza, which the character thinks, oh, that's very good. And then apparently the other protest or rally is about sheep. And this has been very fascinating for me. So thank you, Madrid, for inspiration for my next novel. But yes, to your question, when I finished Americana, my 3rd novel, I knew that I wanted to write about women next, and I knew that I wanted to have different voices. But what often happens when I'm starting out a novel is I have a vague idea, but it's never specific. And it's important for me not to be specific, because otherwise I would lose the magic of writing. Writing fiction for me is a kind of magical discovery. So I didn't know that I wanted many voices. I didn't know how many. I think at some point I thought I would have 3 women. And then at some point it became 4, in the process of the writing. Yeah.
Las 4.
The 4 are protagonists. the four of them, but maybe the two last ones, maybe due to the extension of their chapters, or maybe more important to you, Omilogor and Kaditu.
And Chia, no?
And Chia, yes, it's possible.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Are they more important? This is like being asked which of your children you love the most.
Omilogor, yes.
Yes. And Chia.
Kaditu.
Oh, I thought maybe I didn't quite get the question.
La importancia que le
The importance that you give to the four women. The two last ones, when you're telling their story, you use more pages, more descriptions. It seems that their story is longer than with the two first ones.
I don't think it makes them more important. I think all the characters are equally important. That's actually a lie.
Yes.
There is a character that feels closer to me than the others, and that's Omelogo. Mm-hmm. But Kadiatu is very special to me. Mm-hmm. Kadiatu is the character that I really wanted my reader to like. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time, really, that I have written a character wanting the reader to like that character. Liking my characters has never been something that's important to me. I think if a reader likes a character, that's fine. If a reader doesn't, that's also fine. But with Kadiatu in particular, I really wanted her to be liked. So I think in that sense, she did have a level of importance that the other characters don't have. And Kadiatu is special for a number of reasons, but one of which, of course, is that she's based on a real person. No, she's not based on a real person. She was inspired by a real person. And this real person, Nafissatou Diallo, who I don't know personally, but whose story moved me so much. And so I think in a way, writing Kadiatu then became a kind of tribute to this woman, Nafissatou Diallo. And this is why I hoped my readers would like her.
No explicado mucho.
You didn't explain this in too much detail, but you have the book outside. Everybody has to buy the book, by the way. But just to briefly explain this, I think she probably knows this already, but if Dream Count includes 4 African women whose destinations are mixed. We have Chiamaka. She's a Nigerian traveling writer. She has family expectations. Sikora, her best friend, who is facing a future maternity together with the person whom she thought she didn't know. Omilogor, who is the cousin of Chiamaka, who's trying to fight for justice. And Kadiatu, let's see if I pronounce this properly, a domestic worker of Chiamaka, who is living the worst side of the American dream. So these are the 4 stories of these 4 women in Dream Count. There are a lot of topics in this novel. We will talk about them. There's one that I'm especially interested in. We can start with that. It has to do with post-colonial tourism. The first protagonist is writer, a travel writer, and there's an interesting moment in the novel where she is talking about the nice part of travel writing. She comes from a wealthy family, and sometimes she's blamed for superficiality, and she has this request to talk about the war in Sudan, but she would like to talk about the happiest Africa without relating it to war. And in this conversation that she has, she's talking to somebody, and she says, that the problem is that these white people don't know that we also dream. Why do you choose this character, this writer, this travel writer, and how does she face or deal with this dilemma? She comes from a wealthy family and her hateful, so to speak, boyfriend, we will talk about men afterwards in your novels, but despises this work at the same time. And this post-colonial tourism seems that it has to do with impoverished areas. And it seems that this writer cannot write something beautiful about Africa.
Actually, I didn't know that that's what it's called now, post-colonial tourism. I wasn't sure what that meant when you said that, actually. Yes, that line, when the character said that, and it was her boyfriend, Chuka, who said that, I thought, yeah, that's kind of a good line. I think it's important to, when in thinking and talking about an experience in travel writing as an African, which, by the way, is not something that is necessarily common. Mm-hmm. There is writing about Africa, but often it's not done by Africans. There's travel writing about Africa, but often it's not done by Africans, right? So you have so many people for whom Africa is a backdrop for thinking about and loving animals. But actually, it's a continent that's deeply populated by people. So there's some travel writing you read about Africa, and you will think that Africa is just full of safari places, right? And so I guess for me, in a political way, I do feel strongly about who tells stories, right? Who tells the stories? And I wish that there were more African travel writers. But in the novel, Chia is very dreamy. She's not actually very political, right? She's not really interested. And for her, it's, she wants to be true to who she is, and who she is a person of privilege who wants to go to restaurants. And so her vision is to go to different places and go to the restaurants. And she talks to an editor who says to her, well, but maybe you should write about what's happening in Sudan, or maybe Congo. And this is actually something that I think speaks to the kind of expectations that African writers often have, not just travel writers, because of the enduring stereotype of Africa as a place of just negativity, mm-hmm. and also that view of Africa as a place that is defined by what it does not have rather than what it has and what it is. And I do think in some ways it comes from an inability to understand that, at the risk of putting it too simply, that Africans are also people, mm-hmm. and that Africans are human, and that Africans dream. And that even when people are mired in poverty or conflict, that is not the only thing that occupies their minds. That people, even in the most painful, the most abject circumstances, they're still dreaming, they're still hoping. I remember when I was researching my novel, Half of a Yellow Sun, which is about the Nigerian Biafran War, and talking to women who had experienced the war, and I was struck by how often they talked about, in the middle of the war, we were dreaming about our face creams. and at first, when the first woman who told me that, I thought, my God, that's shallow, right? I thought you'd be thinking about, the dying children. And they were thinking about the dying children, but also about face creams, because that's how humans are. Right? We're complicated and flawed, and I think really that part of the book is about sometimes the inability of people outside of Africa to see that of Africans, the humanity.
Otro dentro de
a woman raising her hand at the back. Okay.
I don't know. Okay. Otro de los temas.
Another topic that you touch upon, these dreams that you were talking about, there's a need, at least in the second story, there seems to be there, the need to seek to be acknowledged by another human being, to fall in love, to find a partner with whom to have a project. I've written down some phrases. We are in love and suddenly we're not in love anymore, and you wonder, where do we go when we stop loving? Where does love go? There's also another idea that has to do with pain. I broke up with Chuka because I could not forget the pain of wanting to love somebody. And in the novel, I can see there's a search for love, and then also the willingness to become a mother or to find a husband or a partner. And in this search, I think this is the case. I don't know if you agree. Male characters are not in a very good position, so to speak. This it might be something according to our times. Is this something voluntary? How you depict these male characters? They're all a disaster, I think.
So, so she said the men are not. It was very subtle, so I wanted to ask you what you meant. But you've answered the question because you said they're disasters.
Sí, mal parados es como no quedan muy bien.
Yes, they are not very. They seem a bit stupid. They're not well off, so to speak.
Oh, really? I mean, I like them. I think they're okay. But also they're men, right? They're okay, they're men. Do you know, one of the wonderful things, really, one of the many wonderful things about writing fiction and being published is that you then see your work through the eyes of other people, and sometimes the interpretation is not at all what you expect. And I have genuinely been surprised by the complaints I've heard about the men. You're not the first person.
Yes.
And I disagree completely with you and with everyone who thinks that these men are disasters. Because, well, first of all, we see these men in retrospect. Chia is looking back. So she's looking at relationships that did not work out, right? Mm-hmm. I think there's one boyfriend, Blaine. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, no, that's not. Blaine is an Americana. I haven't slept. Darnell. Darnell, I bet you don't remember the other names, but Darnell you remember because he was particularly bad, right? So Darnell, I will concede, was not the best of boyfriends, right? But the others, I mean, there's the Englishman who's an absolute sweetheart. Yes, he lied to her about something very important. But I mean, you know, life is not a romance comedy on Netflix. Like, life is complicated. Yes. So I don't doubt that he loves her, but it's complicated, and he lied. And I think in the context of it, we can see why he lied. We're not excusing him, right? But she then also understands that this is not right for her, right? She's just not willing to be in a relationship. I'm trying not to give things away. That is that complicated. Yes. Then there's the other guy who's such a lovely guy, Chuka.
Chuka, yes. Chuka is good.
But she cannot get, there is one good man then. But I think for me, I'm very interested as a reader, as a writer, as a person, in that idea of wanting to love somebody, but you don't love them. You know, sometimes you and I've seen this happen quite a bit. There's a really lovely person. This person is nice and kind and thoughtful, and you want to love them, but you don't. And for me, I find it fascinating because, and also I think it speaks to the nature of love, right? That love can be strange sometimes, and also that ability of people, especially women, to love assholes instead of loving the good guys.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so I mean, and then there's the other guy who's Dutch, who's also really a good guy. I mean, he's not a bad guy.
Yes, it's good, but I think it's not so, no es tan interesante.
He's not as interesting as the women.
This is true, but I write realistic fiction.
Yes.
I'm looking at the world, and I mean, I think we should be honest. I can tell you that in my experience, and of course it's anecdotal, of course I haven't carried out studies, but in my experience, God bless men, but women are more interesting.
Yes, I agree.
This has been my experience. And so because I'm writing realistic fiction, I cannot help but tell the truth.
Lo otro sería ciencia ficción.
The rest would be science fiction, right?
Dedicas el...
The book is a tribute to you, Mother, in memory of my beautiful, loved mother. One of the topics in the book is maternity. You have been a mother yourself, you are, and we're not going to do too many spoilers, but one of the protagonists has a bad moment and her mother is there to support her. How did you face the loss of your mother in 2021, I think, taking into account that you took quite a long time to write this novel?
It's funny, it's strange talking about it, because sometimes even when I talk about my mother dying, there's a part of me that still thinks, did she actually die? So I haven't quite made peace with it. I haven't quite accepted it emotionally that my mother is gone, because it was unbearable for me. And I think partly because my father had died, and that was devastating for me, for my siblings, for my mother. And I just thought that it seemed to me that we had our share of pain. And so for my mother to die a few months later on my father's birthday, it felt like a bad joke, you know? Mm-hmm. And so it was difficult, it still is. But I started writing after my mother died, and I believe that my mother helped me. I really believe that. I felt my mother's presence. I felt my mother's spirit guiding me. And I really think that my mother, because my mother was a very protective mother. You know, my mother, you do not come for her children because she'll come for you. That was my mother's energy. And I just felt that, you know, leaving us the way she did, so suddenly, so unexpectedly, so painfully, that this was her way of helping me cope, right? That she went wherever people go when they die, and she said to the ancestors who are in charge of my writing talent, make it happen now. And my mother was like that. If she wanted to get something happen, she would. So I really believe that. But also, I think in a less direct way, I did not expect this novel to be so much about mothers and daughters as it is. I hadn't imagined or planned to write about mothers and daughters in particular, but I was struck when I was almost done and I reread it, and I thought, my goodness, there's so much about mothers and daughters, and in particular Zipporah. And I realized, that clearly is me, walking through my own issues. And this is why I say that a novel is not always about what a novel is about. There are always layers behind the obvious concerns of a novel. So, obviously, women's lives is very interesting to me, love, all of that. But also, really deeply, it's about trying to make sense of this devastating and, in some ways, eternal loss. And for me, it was also that losing my father was very painful. I was a daddy's girl. I adored him. I loved my mother very much, but I always felt she would be there. I took her for granted. And so when my mother died, the feelings were so much more complicated and honestly, in some ways, more painful. I felt a lot of guilt and I felt a lot of regret because I started to think about how I had taken her for granted and how in the way that I think a lot of mother-daughter relationships are, how unnecessarily complicated I made it. I mean, you look back now and I think I did not have to be so judgmental about little things that my mother did, but I was. And it just made me think about how I had wasted time. And I wasted time judging things. I wasted time just finding things that she had done that were wrong, which was just so stupid.
Yeah.
So that has really complicated my ability to make peace with her not being here. And I think all of that is in this novel.
Yes.
But it's underneath the obvious things that this novel is about.
Es muy, muy bonito lo que has dicho de...
What you said is beautiful about your mother, but I think that in the novel, another important topic apart from maternity is female friendship. There's a debate, can we be friends with our mothers? I say yes. At least I have been able to do that with my mother, but maybe it's not always possible. But female friendship that is present among the four protagonists with different backgrounds, with different social classes, with personal circumstances that are different too. But in that character that leaves aside her career to be able to fight against injustice, to help women who are suffering sexual abuse, I think that practically all of us have heard we should all be feminist. But do you think that one of the keys has to do with women saving each other, accompanying each other, and of course needing men as companions in this journey?
Well, I would, in that last part, I would say not needing men, but wanting men.
Yes.
My life has always been one in which I have always liked men, but I have never needed men. And I think this is a healthy way for women to think about heterosexual relationships, right? That it's lovely to love men, but this idea that one needs men, I think is quite dangerous and has led women to make all kinds of terrible choices and also to remain in very just unhealthy relationships. But I love what you said about can we be friends with our mothers? Yeah. And well done to you.
Yeah.
No, really, I mean that genuinely. I think my mother was my friend. I think we were friends. We were. My mother and I had a really good relationship. We gossiped together. We talked. I could tell my mother anything. This is, of course, when I wasn't being stupidly judgmental, but I think we can be friends with our mothers. I think we should try as daughters, and especially I think as we get older and they get older. I think it's just so much becomes more precious, more, time. You don't know how much time you have. I think, and you're right, this is really, for me, if you asked me, it's about love. But what kind of love? Primarily, I would say it's about the love between women. And the non-romantic love between women. And, I just think that a real female friendship is an act of revolution. Because we're not, as women, all over the world really, in general, we're not socialized to like one another. We're really not. You can see it very early on in primary school, how girls can be so nasty to other girls in ways that they are not with boys. And as you get older, you observe it often in how quick women are to forgive men, but not to forgive other women. And so this kind of socialization that does not encourage a kind of kindness to one another, right? We're so judgmental as women of other women. And so I've always felt that just having a real female friendship, like a solid, be there forever kind of friendship, is a beautiful revolutionary act. And I hope that this is what this novel celebrates. And also for me, that idea of friendship across barriers of culture. I really find that very beautiful, and class and race and whatever else. So Kadiatu is clearly not in any way privileged like the other women in the novel, right? And she doesn't speak English well. She's from Guinea, they're from Nigeria. She's Muslim, they're Christian. She's a domestic worker, so there's a huge class divide. But there's just a wonderful integrity and wisdom about Kadiatu. And you can tell that these three other women respect her and love her. They come to love her. And in some way, she brings them together. And for me, that's a very beautiful thing. This idea of female connection. I used to say very often that I'm a woman who likes women. But now as I get older, I say I'm a woman who likes women who like women. That is really important to me now. I don't have time for women who don't like women.
Ahí te decía uno de los personajes.
One of the characters fights against injustice. And that has to do with migration, sexual abuse, violence. Are these topics still present, important to you? I've been impressed by how you write some of these texts with very harshly, but at the same time you then introduce sort of a more poetic language, and I've been impressed by this mix. I don't really know how you face writing those parts of the text that are so complicated. Are these still important topic for you that have to do with your activist fight against sexual violence against women?
I often actually want to be very clear about separating the two parts of myself. So I think of the part of me that writes fiction as being quite different from the part of me that sort of, rants sometimes and gets very angry about injustice in the world, particularly injustice against women, but really just in general injustice. Sometimes I wake up and I'm so angry at just everything wrong with the damn world, and late stage capitalism and unnecessary wars in which innocent people die for no reason apart from the egos of stupid men, and all of that. And then there are the days when I just want to read poetry. And it's the part of me that just wants to lie in bed and read poetry, who I think writes literature. But because it is impossible to write stories in which you somehow do not bring yourself in, I recognize that my literature also in some ways engages with my politics, but I hope not in a way that's direct. I think literature has to be messy. I think it's important that when you write fiction that it cannot be ideologically correct everywhere. Like if you're writing women, you have to write women who are not feminist because the world is full of them. This idea of telling the truth. But in terms of, I've also I believe in what I like to call a kind of radical honesty when it comes to fiction. If you're writing realistic fiction, you have to tell the truth of the world as it is. And this idea of literature as a mirror that we hold up to the society. And so, sexual abuse of women is a very important thing that's happening everywhere in the world. Male violence against women and girls, if you look at the statistics, they're all going up everywhere. And I actually forgot to look up Spain before I came here. I usually do that before I go to every country. I look up the statistics of male violence against women and girls, and always it's crazy. And so I think this is important, and I think that if one is going to write about it, I think one does a disservice to the seriousness of the issue if you write about it in ways that somehow is sort of too watery. I've read novels in which I read a chapter and it's supposed to be about something like sexual violence, and at the end I'm thinking I don't even know what happened, because the language is so sort of convoluted and so eager to be literary that it then loses the power of that actual thing that's happening. So I just feel strongly that certain things require a certain kind of directness. There's a quote I love from Ian McEwan, and this is not exactly how he said it, but anyway, something about if you're writing about something that's moving very fast, it is not necessary for your sentences to also move very fast. And there's something I like about that, because I think, you can in fact sort of slow down and look something in the face and write it in that way because it is important and it matters. And so, yes, sexual assault, and particularly in this case, this was based on something that actually happened, right? And I had read many accounts of the real thing, and I just felt that in retelling, because that's what it is, in retelling the story, of course I used my own language, but I did feel very strongly that it was important for the language not to get in the way of the seriousness of that moment. Right? That I had to pare down the language. You had to reduce the language to the simplest form possible, so that the entire imaginative space is taken on by what is happening and not by the language. I think language can come after that. Mm-hmm. I feel really strongly about that, especially when it comes to such a thing as sexual assault. It's something that is still not, in my opinion, not fully acknowledged. Mm-hmm. In the West, in Africa, everywhere. It's just not. Yes. I mean, there was a brief moment of Me Too, but then it feels as though there's two steps back now, and I think that more women are now reluctant even to talk about experiences of sexual assault because of what we now call the backlash. Because the understanding is that when you tell your story, the first response you're going to get is the accusation that you're lying. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've always found that strange, because I don't know any woman who wants to be known as somebody who was sexually harassed. I mean, why would anybody choose to lie about something just so horrible? Mm-hmm. Right? But this is, I think, what partly the Me Too movement created, but it's where society is at the moment, which I think is why it's even more important to write and talk about sexual assault in ways that are as direct as possible.
Mm-hmm. Totalmente.
Yes, I agree. There's another topic. You start with it. This is more a situation, I would say. It has taken you 12 years to write this novel, more or less. And this is, you have the pandemic occurring, the isolation. The novel starts with that context, the pandemic. Why did you want to start there? Was it something final for you? There's also a sort of collective mourning, then there's a more individual mourning. How important was it to you? I think, the pandemic was important to everyone, but why did you decide to have this as the first situation, the first stage?
Actually, because it wasn't even so much a personal decision as it was kind of like an artistically strategic one, which is to say that the pandemic is gold for telling stories. I mean, that period was so particular. The world had stopped. We were experiencing, it felt like history was happening and we were in it. And as a storyteller, it's almost, you cannot resist that. I mean, it's so singular and so powerful, and you can do anything with it. And because I had wanted a character who could look back on her life, it just felt to me that nothing would be better than the pandemic, especially the early times at lockdown, because you're at home. What else can you do? I mean, this is why this is why many marriages ended, because yes. People suddenly started looking at their lives and they're like, why am I with this person? And so this is a kind of forced truth telling, I think, telling ourselves the truths of our lives that very strange and singular moment in our lives did for us. And so it just felt to me, of course I have to use the pandemic. But also I think, I'm sure that at some level, I don't know. I mean, the pandemic itself was a very difficult time for me because my father died in June of 2020. So it was, shortly into lockdown. And as a family, we would have these Zoom calls very often. and we would look at each other on the screens, and we were sort of spread around. I was in the US, and I had just come back to the US, and the plan was to go back to Nigeria after 2 weeks or something, and I was going to go back to my ancestral hometown, and I was going to spend a month with my parents. And my father and I had all these plans. He was going to show me the particular place where my great-grandmother had lived, things we had been putting off through the years, and we'd said, we'll finally do this when you come back. And then lockdown happened so abruptly, and so I couldn't leave the US. I'm stuck in the US. My parents are in my ancestral hometown. I have a brother in England. I have a brother in Lagos. I have a sister in Lagos. I have a sister also in America. I have a brother in America. So we're all just and we're constantly on Zoom looking at each other and just talking about the strangeness of this thing that's happening. But at the same time, just not imagining, that my father would die. So for me, the pandemic was an awareness of a kind of larger suffering. I would watch TV and I would just start crying, just looking at the bodies of people, right? It's that idea that suddenly you're mourning strangers, but you are, because it felt very collective. And then my father died, and suddenly I'm then just thrown into this just a kind of violent pain. And it's a very, very selfish kind of feeling. I think grief is quite selfish because, grief sucks you into yourself. And so I think I felt like there are weeks in which I did not even know or care about what was happening in the outside world. Because for me, it was all about my world has broken into pieces. My father is gone. And then at some point, again, I became aware of the world. So the pandemic was such a strange time for me, such a strange time. And maybe also in using it in the novel, maybe I was trying to... It's interesting, I'm thinking of this now, so I'm making it up as I go. But maybe I was also trying to recast it for myself. Mm-hmm. Maybe I wanted through my characters to experience a different kind of lockdown, mm-hmm. Where, I don't know.
No vamos a hablar ya.
We're not going to talk about the novel anymore because you have to buy it. We're going to talk about it, but not the stories within it. I have a couple of questions, and then we will open the floor for maybe one or two questions on your process of writing and this narrative silence of so many years. I'm sure you've received many questions about this silence. Has it got to do with how you were explaining your losses, how your world was broken? Did you need this amount of time to be able to write this novel, the novel Dream Count, or taking into account the many successes, especially Americana and the previous ones, did you feel a lot of pressure to write the next novel? How did you face this novel? There's been silence, but you've also written other important works, and especially also many reviews have said this. It is one of the most awaited comebacks in the world of literature. How do you feel with regard to that? No pressure at all, right?
Okay. No, and you're right. People have asked me about this, and I just want to say thank you for asking nicely, because many Nigerians have asked me in ways that are a bit more, they're like, it's just a novel. Why did it take you so long? So, and also what many people in Nigeria have said to me is, well, you better not take this long for the next one. So I've had to say, okay, I have to get back to work. But really, I had a creative dry spell. That's why it took me so long. It took me so long because I could not write. I would sit at my laptop and I felt that I had characters in my head, but I just could not write. And that is the worst place to be for a person for whom fiction is the center. I mean, writing fiction is what gives me meaning. It's also what gives me, apart from people I love, the greatest joy. It's it's my vocation. It's why I'm here in the world, honestly. And so when I couldn't write for a number of years, it was horrible and painful, and I was terrified. I have two great fears in my life. The first fear is that I will lose the people I love, and that fear has been intensified since I lost my parents. The second fear is that I will never write fiction. And so living through those years, I was very unhappy. And I think I try to shield my unhappiness, especially because it's not an unhappiness that most people would understand, you know. And if I did try to talk to people I love, they'd be like, well, but you've done so well. And I'm thinking, but it's not about that. It's this need to write. And even if nobody buys the book, I have to write. This is who I am. And in terms of pressure, actually, I don't think it had anything to do with the success of the last novel, because I don't remember that. I mean, and I mean this seriously. When I'm sitting at my desk trying to write, it's very internal. It's a kind of trying to reach out to the fullness of yourself. And so I'm not thinking about my publishers or my readers. I'm really not. And if I didn't have the good fortune I have to be read by people, I would be writing. You know, I wouldn't be read, of course, I'd be unknown, but I would be writing because my spirit needs to write. And, you know, also to be fair to the people who published me, never put any pressure. I did not for one day get any message from a publisher saying, oh, what, never. You know, that they've just, I'm fortunate. I have nice publishers. And I think maybe I think that most of the people who publish me understand how much writing fiction means to me, and so of course must know that if I'm not writing anything or sending anything, it's because I'm suffering. Right? It's not for lack of effort or desire to write. And so no, it was actually quite difficult, and sometimes I'm so superstitious that even talking about it, I start to feel a slight panic because I think, my God, it might come back. So I think I'll stop now. I'm so happy that I started writing. I'm so grateful to my mother. This book was finished. I cannot tell you how grateful I felt. That's the feeling, that's the overriding feeling since this book was published, just gratitude. I'm so damn grateful. I finished the novel, and the character's in my head right now as I speak to you. And so I'm hoping that I will never again have that kind of crazy dry spell, and that it will not take 12 years. This is the hope. Because also there are Nigerians waiting to tell me off. So there is also that.
Iba a hacerte la última pregunta, pero
I was going to ask you the last question, but you have mentioned the topic of spirit. And in the novel, there's a moment in which one of the protagonists says they can break your heart, but they can't break your spirit. What happens if somebody breaks your spirit? What does this mean exactly? Can you explain the difference between love and spirit? Spirit as something that cannot be broken and that accompanies you in difficult moments, even when they've broken your heart.
Well, I have to thank you for noticing that line, because it's also one of my favorite bits in the book, really. And I think it's because it feels personal to me. I'm so happy to see that I'm not the only one who's hot. There are people fanning themselves. Oh, and there's also a man fanning himself, because you know, I'm hot for particular reasons. I don't know how many women are hot for the same reasons, but so if anybody wants to lend me a fan, I'm very happy to take it. But I just really love that you point that out. Although I'm not sure I have anything else to add to that sentence, but I think that idea of, you know, to have a broken heart, I think we could say is life, right? It happens. You love somebody, they wound you, right? Or they don't reciprocate and your heart is broken. But for me, the spirit is something deeper. And my dream, and I often say that for me to be a feminist is to dream, really. If you ask me what it means for me to be a feminist, I would say to you, it means that I'm dreaming of a different kind of world. I'm dreaming of a world where there is real equality. And my part of that dream is one in which all the women in the world, even when they get their hearts broken, that their spirits do not break. Because I have seen women whose spirits have been broken, and it's a terrible thing. You lose yourself. There are women who, there's an expression in Igbo that translates she's faded. Like the color has been leached out of her, right? And so there are women you see, and they've gone through like a bad marriage, for example, and it's reduced them, right? It's not. It's and for me, it's just that idea that the spirit is broken, and and when a spirit breaks, it's almost impossible to pick yourself up.
Y si se rompe el espíritu, se puede.
Hold on.
If your spirit is broken, can you rebuild it as we rebuild our hearts?
I think it's so much more difficult, which is why I think it's so important for that spirit to be preserved. And so that even when people are going into relationships, that in a way you have to preserve your spirit. There is your heart can be broken, it's fine. Sometimes even hearts don't mend, you just kind of move on. But the spirit, I think it is the thing that is essential to our humanity. And this is also why I feel so strongly about people in relationships in which the romantic partner is sort of deliberately cruel. It just feels to me it's an act to break a spirit. Because yes, you break a heart, you're not very loving, whatever. But then the kind of cruelty, there are men who will say to women, who will say things to women that are just intended to reduce them. Right, and I just find it to be such an ugly thing to do. So yes, I think that matters a lot to me because that is my hope for women. That even when your heart is broken, your spirit is not. Because then you can rebuild. There are people out in the world, there are chukas, and there's a chuka out there maybe. Yeah, people are like, what the hell is she talking about? It's a character in the novel.
Te iba a hacer la última pregunta, lo que pasa que creo.
I was going to ask you one last question. I think maybe you've already answered it, but let's go ahead and then we'll open the floor. Which dream do we have right now, surrounded by global uncertainty? Which dream would you like us to continue having always?
Wow. I don't know. You saved the hardest question for last. I don't actually know what the answer is. I think I want us to. I think maybe I could tell you how I think about this really strange time. And it's a strange time, I think, for so many people, because you don't have to be American to be affected by what America does. And I'm a person for whom, home now means two places, America and Nigeria. And I've just watched in disbelief as America has become what I never thought it would. I grew up in a military dictatorship in Nigeria, but if you told me that that in America in 2025, that agents of the government would wear masks and break car windows and literally kidnap people, and take them where nobody knows until lawyers start to fight to try and find out where they are, I would just laugh and say that would not happen in America. And this is because I grew up with America as this very aspirational place where institutions worked. But all of that has crumbled. And also I realized that Hollywood has been lying to us. Hollywood produced all of these films in which we were made to believe that America was exceptional and people stood up to power, and that's just all bullshit, right? And now we need to cancel Hollywood, but that's a joke. I think we now live in a time where you have to be clear because the headline is going to be Chimamanda says cancel Hollywood, and this is the thing about you almost cannot even joke about anything, but really I do think that Hollywood's been lying to us. What do I wish? I wish we would. maybe I can tell you, for me personally, it is so important to me that every day I tell myself that what is not normal is not normal. Like, it's so important to me to remind myself, this is madness. Because you experience something over and over, you read the same things in the news, and suddenly it starts to feel okay. It starts to feel normal. I was talking to someone a few days ago, and we both talked about how it just seems there's more ugliness in the world, that more people are willing to be unkind unnecessarily, nasty, unfriendly, openly racist in a way that just would not have happened 3 years ago even, right? Not even in the first administration of this American president. And so I think the dream I would say I would hope for all of us to still hold on to is the dream of knowing that these eternal ideas that will always matter and that will always overcome authoritarianism, and those ideas of just justice and fair play and honesty and thinking about the well-being of other people and respecting other people and even just being polite and decent, like just these old-fashioned ideas. I think they really matter. It doesn't matter what's happening politically in the world. It doesn't matter that it seems sometimes that the side that is authoritarian seems to be winning. All of that doesn't matter. What matters is that we hold on, that we keep dreaming of what is in fact good and decent and honest and just and humane. So my dream is that we still keep thinking about people as people. That's my dream.
Bravo. Pues tenemos turno para...
Well, we can now open the floor. 2-3 questions over there. First of all, thank you very much for being here, for your stories, for giving us so much wisdom. I would like to take this opportunity to ask you a little more personal question. And from mother to mother, I would like to ask you about this change in your life. Has this changed the way in which you are feminist when you've become a mother?
Yes, I think so. I think becoming a mother made me less theoretical about feminism. I wrote a little book about how to raise a child, and this is before I had a child. It's very easy to write about how to raise a child when you don't have a child. And so I thought, surely this can't be that difficult. This is just what you need to do, right? And so I wrote it and sent it off to the woman who'd asked me to give her advice. And then I had my child. And I just thought, my God, I want that book back. Because I need to start by saying, number 1, it is very difficult. Number 2, it will be very difficult. Number 3, it will be very, very difficult before I give my suggestions. But I mean, really, I think it's an interesting question. I think it has made me, I think a less theoretical sort of. I never really was very theoretical. My interest has always been in stories. So I've sort of always been grounded in stories. I was a feminist when I was a little girl, and it's not because I read books on feminism. It's because I was just watching what was happening around me and the lives of women around me and that kind of thing. Yeah, really, it's made me aware of how difficult it is to try and raise children in a way that isn't necessarily conventional, so that you're teaching children things at home, but then there is a world out there that just seems almost eager to destroy everything you've taught your child. And sometimes it's little things. When my daughter was quite little, before she started preschool, I just wanted her to have all kinds of toys, and I wanted her to have, so she had blocks and she had dolls and she had little toy cars, and she liked them all. And then she started preschool in America, and suddenly she would come back and say to me, but that's for boys and that's for girls. And I used to think, what the hell? And the other thing, of course, is that it's so difficult as a parent to challenge teachers. Often kids think teachers know everything and parents don't know anything at all. And so when I would try to sort of say to her, well, no, your teacher isn't quite right. She's like, of course my teacher is right. So that's very hard. And it's still, even still just trying to sort of go against the wisdom or the supposed wisdom of teachers is still very difficult. By the way, I say this as a person who thinks teachers do God's work, but they're just all of these sort of cultural assumptions that perhaps even without intending to, institutions like schools, but also churches, kind of inject them into children. And then as a parent, and you don't want that for your child, it's difficult to undo, I think. And maybe also I will say that it's made me have a lot more empathy for women. And by that I mean that before I had children, I think it was much easier for me to judge certain decisions that women took. Becoming a mother made me realize, and it's not so much that these are decisions I would necessarily support, but the decisions I understand. That women who make choices to be in terrible marriages because of their children. And I have always felt very strongly that this is bad even for children. But sometimes it's complicated, and I've come to understand that. The love for a child is such a... I don't think there's anything like it. And that also has been a lesson for me. I don't think, never mind men and loving men, but loving a child, my God, you love a person more than yourself. And I think it changes everything about the way you look at the world. It did for me. Yeah. Thank you.
Una pregunta.
Any more questions? We have a minority of men, so let's give them the floor. I would like to thank your presence here. At the same time, I would like to thank my sister for giving me your book. I have 3 sisters. I'm from Brazil, and I am about to try to make my dreams come true once again. When I seen the title of your book, I said, I have to be there. I have to go there. I would like to know if you could explain or mention which type of music makes you dream, and if you have any music related to Brazilian culture.
Well, I love Brazil. I absolutely love Brazil. I've been to Brazil a few times. We actually went on holiday in Brazil, pretty much my entire family. We were in Rio, but I went to São Paulo alone because nobody wanted to go to São Paulo. Everybody wanted to be in Rio and to be on the beach. But I love Brazil for many reasons, but one of which is that the Afro-Brazilian community is one that I have immense respect for, because I think that they have just, against all odds, just pushed back and done things. And anyway, music, I have to disappoint you and tell you that in general, for me, music is noise. I'm very sorry to disappoint, and I say this knowing that I am a complete anomaly. But most of the time, especially when I'm walking, I cannot stand the sound of music. I need silence. I think the only time that music is useful to me is when I'm walking out, because it makes me keep going. Brazilian music.
¿Le puedes recomendar algo?
But no, we're supposed to go to at night, the dancing thing. No, samba. Yeah, so anything, the music that in samba, because I like that. But honestly, and I should tell you that my not having a particular person is not really about Brazil. I'm just not very interested in, especially in contemporary music. I listen to a lot of a certain kind of old school West African high life. I like that. There's some contemporary Nigerians I like very much, but that's also because they're kind of the new age high life. But really, and I love Nina Simone, but I'm just really, you look at my music thing, there's almost nothing there. It's very sad, and I'm very sorry to bring this news to you, but this is the reality. I mean, I could pretend and tell you how much I love jazz, but that would be a lie. So...
Pues vamos con la última, no sé.
Okay, so last question. Maybe we have a question over here, over there. Let's go ahead.
Hello and welcome to Madrid. I live in Madrid, so the question is, would it have been possible to place these 4 characters out of the USA? Would they be portrayed as 4 women who are striving for many things which could have been happening in other countries as immigrants?
Yes, I think so. I think I could have. I mean, I write about, and one character, Melogo, is mostly in Nigeria. So her story, we mostly follow her story in Nigeria, and then she goes to the US, but very briefly, and then she goes back to Nigeria. I think yes, we could place them somewhere else. I mean, there's also just that practical thing about writing, where it's easier to write about where you know, and really, the 2 places I know very well are America and Nigeria, obviously because that's where I've lived, and so it's just easy for me to write about them with a certain kind of authority, and I don't have to research. And so one of the characters is from Guinea, which is a country I just do not know very well, so I did do a lot of research to write her, and it really takes a lot of time to research, especially because I just want to get the details right. And so imagine if I had to sort of place them somewhere else that I don't know very well, it would take me 25 years to finish. And I mean, we don't want that, right?
Bueno, muchísimas gracias a todos.
Well, thank you very much, and especially to Chimamanda for being here.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Chimamanda va a firmar.
Chimamanda's going to be signing books, so you can go over there. Thank you.